Good evening, everyone. I'm Jeff Simons. I'm the superintendent of the schools for the East Greenbush Central School District. And on behalf of our school board and all of our administrative team, teachers and staff, I welcome you to this very important community meeting. Tonight, we want to discuss with you some changes that the district has become aware of related to New York State Department of Health regulations. The district has been reviewing those changes and making plans to make modifications to our current model of school reopening. One of the requirements of the New York State Department of Health interim guidance documents is that we consult and we inform our community. So during tonight's meeting, I'm joined by a number of our administrative team members, principals of our respective schools, our directors at the central office administration level, and our assistant superintendent to discuss with you our proposed plans. After this discussion, it is my intent to bring recommendations to the Board of Education at its regularly scheduled meeting tomorrow evening to implement some changes that will help bring more students into school, more days per week for in-person instruction. Before I begin the formal presentation, I just want to quickly go around and introduce the members of our panel, our administrative team that have joined us this evening. I'll start with our Assistant Superintendent, Jim McHugh, who is in charge of curriculum instruction, among a number of other areas at the Central Administration. Director of Pupil Personnel Services, Molly McGrath, who is in charge of special education related services in our nurses program. We have our high school principal, Mr. Mike Harkin, who is the principal at Columbia High School. And we are joined by our distinguished elementary principals, Helen Squilacci, principal at Red Mill, Dan Garib, principal at Green Meadow, Jack Alvey, principal at DPS. We have Marty Mahar, who is our principal at Belltop, and Wayne Grignon, our principal at Genet. We're also joined by our middle school principal, Jill Barker, and our Director of Human Resources, Marissa Cannon. Helping me make sure that this meeting runs smoothly is Mark Adam, our Director of Public Information, and Peter Goodwin, our Director of Technology. And I think I got everybody in order in which you appear on my screen. So I think we've covered everybody. I'm going to begin by sharing a formal presentation with you, and then I will use thought exchange to respond to any questions, concerns, and issues that you may have within our parent community or anyone else in the community that wants to express or prioritize some of the issues that you may have questions in regard to. And I'm going to check into my panel, thumbs up panel, if you can see my screen. Very good, I did it correctly this time. Okay, the community may be aware that over the course of the last several weeks, we have been anticipating changes that would come from our New York State Department of Health that would enable the district to provide more days of in-person instruction. We want to, this evening, check in with our school community to let you know what we are planning and how we are implementing new guidance. The guidance was received on April 9th, just at the end of our spring recess. And so we've not had a lot of time to plan, but we do want to be as responsive to our community as possible and increase the number of students that are coming into our schools every day within the regulations and parameters established by the New York State Department of Health. And this evening, we want to have an opportunity to respond to your key questions and concerns. Throughout this pandemic, going back to March of last spring, please be assured that our top priority has been the health and safety of our students, of our staff, of our community, and our families. And during the course of the time, really since September, since we've been operating under our current hybrid model, we have avoided some of the large-scale quarantining issues and school shutdowns that some districts have experienced since September. was only a short period of time prior to the holiday recess in which our plans needed to change for a couple of days based on the number of students and staff members who were subject to quarantines, where we had to shift to full virtual learning for a couple of days immediately prior to the break. As we continue to evaluate our program, please know that where we could, we made adjustments to the number of days that certain groups of students were experiencing in-person learning within our district. We took a look at our special education population, our students who were receiving alternative education programs, English as a new language services, and over the course of the last several weeks and months, we've made adjustments. And so we do have a number of students who would benefit from the additional support coming into our schools either 4 days a week or in some cases 5 days a week. Additionally, when the COVID infection circumstances within our community began to get better during the months of February and March, we made adjustments by bringing in all of our kindergarten students whose families wanted them to participate 5 days a week, our grade 1 students, and right after spring recess, we were able to accommodate all of our grade 2 students. Throughout that process, we also changed our virtual live Wednesday schedule for our K-5 students as we continue to look at what could be done within our requirements. We have also made adjustments to provide academic tutoring and social emotional support services where needed for our students. And over time, we have approved the operations of interscholastic athletics, including higher risk sports that occurred during our winter season and have occurred during our fall 2 season, which is currently operating. And we have begun the process over the course of the last month of approving other non-sports related after-school activities, such as clubs and other extracurricular opportunities for our students. On March 19th, the CDC updated its recommendations for school reopening and included within its guidance options to reduce social distancing from 6 feet to 3 feet under certain circumstances. The CDC guidelines were also changed, indicating that the 6 feet social distancing requirement would need to be maintained between the adults within the school environment and between the adults and the students. This change in the social distancing requirement, included within the CDC guidance issued on March 19th, was also supported by public health organizations such as the World Health Organization and the American Academy of Pediatrics. Additionally, throughout this period of time, really since the late fall, we have advocated for further changes in state regulations that would enable our state to adopt changes as recommended by the CDC so that we as a school district could increase the number of days of in-person learning opportunities for our students. There was a significant period of time between the time that the CDC issued its guidance and New York State incorporated that guidance with other parameters within the regulations that were issued on the Friday of spring break at around 5 p.m., April 9th. In accordance with the new guidance, here are some highlights. Face masks are still required to be worn by everyone within the school at all times, except for during meals. 6 feet of social distancing is required to be maintained between the adults within the school, between the adults and the students, in common areas of our schools, such as our gymnasium, our cafeterias, and our hallways, and when students are not able to wear masks because they are eating, for example. You may have heard that a number of areas of the state during the course of the last several weeks were considering putting polyurethane barriers in classrooms, and in fact have done that. Barriers are no longer recommended pursuant to both the CDC and the New York State Department of Health guidance. Within the New York State regulations that we are bound to follow, the social distancing requirement is predicated on the community transmission rate as determined by the CDC, a different set of metrics than what New York State is currently utilizing to calculate the infection rate within the capital region, for example, or within Rensselaer County. Areas of our country are classified by the CDC as having low to moderate risk of transmission, substantial risk of transmission, or high risk of transmission. The majority of counties within our state, in accordance with the CDC metrics for calculating community infection rate, are considered to be in the category of high risk transmission. And in those circumstances, elementary schools can maintain 3 feet social distancing within classrooms, and cohorting is recommended where possible. However, and this is important as our plans reflect this constraint, middle school and high schools must adhere to the 6 feet social distancing requirement unless we can cohort the students. The definition of cohorting, in accordance with the New York State Department of Health, is assigning students to permanent groups, fixed groups, in which all of the students in every class is the same group of students. So in other words, your child would be in English class, math class, science class, social studies class, and all electives and other types of courses with the same exact students. In a large school environment, such as Columbia High School, with more than 1,200 students, and Goff Middle School with more than 950 students, that is not possible in the spring of a given school year without every single student's courses, teacher assignments being changed, and even then, we're not sure that that would be possible within the school our size, within a school system our size. The disruption that would be caused by cohorting students at this point in the year at the middle school level and the high school would be more disruptive than the current constraints of our hybrid program on our students, on our families, and on our staff. So, while we are still considering potential changes to the middle school and the high school level, we have completed our analysis of the kindergarten through 5th grade, and we are very pleased to announce that all grade 3, 4, and 5 students will be able to return to full in-person learning 5 days a week, effective next Monday, April 26th. And I want to thank our principals and our teachers and our support staff for making all those plans in such a quick period of time, as we only received the regulations on April 9th. Additionally, at the grade 6 through 12 level, our intent is to remain in the hybrid. However, we are looking at ways that we can potentially adjust the schedules to bring more students in, potentially 4 days a week or 5 days a week. But given the number of families who've responded to our survey that we issued on Friday, and given the requirement that we cannot implement 3 feet social distancing at the middle school and the high school, cohorting is not possible if we want to continue to offer the elective courses, college credit courses, and AP courses, for example. We are unable to offer 5 days of in-person learning for our middle school students and our high school students at this time. But we are continuing to look at options that might bring more students in. At all levels, we've been very successful at offering a full remote program to our kindergartners all the way through our seniors. That full remote program will be maintained by the district at least through the end of the year, and in anticipation of whether or not we receive further guidance over the summer that would require that option to be continued in September of next school year. So we've done an analysis of our classroom space. At the kindergarten through 2nd grade level, in some cases, we will be able to keep those grade levels in classroom arrangements that remain 6 feet apart. And in some cases, as a practical matter, the 3 feet social distancing change is enabling all of the class to come back together and instruction to be able to be delivered within the same classroom space. Grades 3 through 5, in all cases, in all schools, will be socially distanced at 3 feet within those assigned classrooms. And grades 6 through 12 will continue to be socially distanced at 6 feet due to the CDC transmission rate metrics that have been included within the New York State Department of Health regulations. When we think about bringing all of our students back for 5 days per week, we have to make considerations regarding how those students would not only be served in the classroom, but how they will be served in special area courses such as art, library, music, and physical education. In most cases, the majority of our students will continue to receive art instruction in the art room. In some cases, where the number of students in a particular section of a grade level or in a grade level overall, in combination with some students that may go into art rooms because they come from special education services into those spaces, we would be utilizing different spaces to be able to deliver art on a limited basis. In some cases, that would be the art teacher coming into the classroom, the regular common branch classroom being used by the class, or in some cases, an alternative space within the building. Additionally, library program schedules will remain pretty close to what they are now, with some exceptions that in some cases, limited cases, the librarian would come into the classroom and provide library instruction. Music, in some cases, is being maintained in the current room. And in some cases, as the weather has gotten nicer, we are going to be able to have our students going outside for music. It's important to note that over the course of the last several weeks, the new guidance has also indicated that singing, the playing of musical instruments can be done with social distancing of 6 feet. And originally the recommendation at the beginning of the school year was 12 feet. So we will be having students participate in music 6 feet away from each other. And in some cases, weather permitting, we will be utilizing outside space. And in some buildings, we are making use of outdoor tents in the case of some special area courses and in the case of lunch and recess, which we'll talk about in a little while. So we do have the ability, and we are investing the resources to accommodate all kids K through 5. And we anticipate that the schedule, the amount of time that students receive art, library, music, and physical education instruction will not change as a result of bringing more kids in for in-person learning 5 days per week at the K-5 level. Additionally, under the revised interim guidelines of the New York State Department of Health, when students are eating, they need to remain 6 feet or more apart. That has presented some considerations and some challenges in some cases to the capacity of our cafeterias, as well as our lunch schedules. For example, we try to be sensitive not to schedule lunch too early because the kids will be hungry by the end of the day. We try not to schedule lunch too late by creating other additional lunch periods. So at Belltop, we will be using the cafeteria as we are now for lunch. At DPS, we have arrangements made for both the cafeteria and the computer lab, and the district has purchased tents for outside dining for our second graders, which I think will be enjoyed by the students. Today we'll be using the cafeteria Green Meadow, the cafeteria Red Mill. We will have the cafeteria in use, and the smaller grade levels where there are enough students, a smaller number of students so that they can eat 6 feet apart in a classroom. We'll have to eat in the classrooms on rainy days. Golf, we are using half of the gymnasium and the cafeteria. Now that the weather is nice, we anticipate more kids going out for PE and Columbia High School. If and when we can bring more students in, those arrangements will be in place. And we're currently evaluating what we can do at grades 6 through 12. Transportation is an important consideration. With the weather getting nicer, the plan is to continue to provide appropriate ventilation with the windows open and the hatch open. Additionally, we will socially distance students as much as is practical on our buses. In some cases, we encourage parents to continue to bring their children to school. In other cases, the number of parents who are dropping students off has caused some traffic congestion. So we have to weigh the number of kids that we can put on a bus and the number of parents who are driving kids to school and try to make the best determinations as we can within the parameters. Students and staff will continue to wear face masks at all times when on the buses. As far as drop-off and dismissal procedures, we do not anticipate any changes at this time. However, as our principals and our support staff always do, we continue to monitor any delays or any issues that may occur at arrival and dismissal time, and we reserve options to make adjustments as necessary as we move into the end of the year and close out the year. Parents are reminded of the timeframes. It's very important because we're trying to manage bus traffic coming into the school, staff coming into the school, and parent drop-off, that those times be adhered to as best as possible. Sometimes coming too early can cause a problem, more so than coming a little bit later, and we want to be mindful of that. Parent drop-off and pickup can be adjusted and may be adjusted to alleviate traffic depending on what we observe during the first week of the change in which grades 3 through 5 are coming in. Under the new regulations, when students are socially distanced 3 feet, mass breaks are not permitted. Different than what has been in place when students are socially distanced 6 feet. Principals have been working with teachers on ways to continue on a limited basis to provide mass breaks. There may be circumstances in which teachers are inviting students to leave a classroom area, supervised in the small groups, to take a mass break. Mass breaks would certainly occur as students are eating lunch and outside during recess periods. But in class, when students are learning and only located 3 feet apart, mass breaks are not permitted in those circumstances under New York State Department of Health revised guidance. So our timeline, we are having a meeting this evening. We are anticipating that the survey that we sent to middle school and high school students, families on Friday, would be received by the end of the day tomorrow. We are looking at that data student by student, class by class, to see what other options might exist within the 3 feet, within the 6 feet social distancing requirement at the middle school and the high school. I will be presenting these changes, among others, to the Board of Education tomorrow evening, which is a public board meeting that begins at 7 p.m. And on Monday, April 26th, we'll welcome all of our grade 3, grade 4, and grade 5 students whose families want them to participate in full in-person learning to come into the classrooms and join their peers who have been operating in different cohorts for a large segment of the year. The only options that are in place effective April 26th for our students at the kindergarten through 5th grade level are full-time in-person or full remote. We will no longer operate a hybrid model at the K through 5 level effective April 26th. With that, I'm going to turn the program back over to the panel. I'm going to ask Mark Adam to share our thought exchange question, and we'll try to address as many questions as we possibly can that are indicated as priorities of our group. Mr. Adam.
Thank you, Mr. Simons. Could you put me on as a host so I can share my screen?
I'm going to ask Mr. Goodwin to do that.
You should be on now, Mark.
All right. Thank you. Okay, Mr. Simons, do you see the thought exchange screen?
All good, Mr. Adam.
Thank you. All right, so once again, we'll be using a thought exchange for this evening's Q&A. The instructions are here on the screen. You'll just go to tejoin.com and then type in the 9-digit code you see on your screen. And our thought exchange question is, what are your key questions, thoughts, or concerns regarding our proposed changes to the reopening plan? So I will start the timer now and give you about 3 minutes to write down any of your comments or questions. Once you submit those, then you can rank the thoughts of others, and the most top of mind thoughts will come to the top, and we can respond to those through our panel. So again, you'll go to tejoin.com and type in the 9-digit code you see on your screen. All right, we will move to our panel now, but we will keep this thought exchange open. If you have any other questions or comments, you can continue to submit those. Again, you'll go to tejoin.com and type in that 9-digit code. All right, so our first question, what are your plans for the fall?
That's a great question. I will be quite honest and frank with you. At this point, neither the New York State Education Department or the New York State Department of Health have issued any guidance for September. The only guidance that we have received is this interim guidance that permits districts to go from 6 feet to 3 feet social distancing under certain circumstances. It's important for everybody on this meeting and everybody in the community to understand that our district administration had a plan to go 3 feet at all levels and in all buildings that we developed 2 to 3 weeks prior to receiving the regulation. We have the capacity at the high school and the middle school to bring all children in for 5 days a week in-person instruction if we were permitted by the regulations. We have the space. The difficulty is that the new regulations tied cohorting of students, the assignment of students to fixed groups for every class, to the community transmission rate using a national metric and not a local or regional metric. So we are going to be advocating for the removal of that requirement to cohort middle school and high school students from any regulations that come out that would govern how we operate in the fall. We want all of the students whose families want them to attend in-person learning from kindergarten through senior year to be able to come back to class every day in person in September. The current regulations would not permit us to do that, and so we're going to advocate that they change. We have been successful over the course of the last couple of months of advocating for the social distancing requirements to go from 6 feet to 3 feet. Our focus is now on advocacy that will permit a full reopening in September. We say that because the infection rate within our schools has been 0. And while we have had a number of student and staff cases, through the contact tracing, there is no evidence that anyone within our schools, students or staff, has contracted COVID-19 from being in school. The contraction of COVID-19 had occurred through outside activity. So we don't have any guidance for the fall at this point. I will say that I learned today, as a result of our advocacy committee work, that we will be having a community forum on June 2nd regarding reopening in the fall, and that the Commissioner of Education, Dr. Betty Rosa, has accepted our invitation and will be attending that event that will be hosted by East Greenbush and Questar BOCES on June 2nd. And we'll be sending out more information for the parents to join us for that forum. We want everybody back in the fall, and we're just as fatigued by all of this as everyone. We want the kids back in.
Next question. If the rates do go down in Rensselaer County by that CDC metric that you referenced, will the middle school and high school be able to go more in person?
The infection rates in New York State right now are the lowest they have been since November. And the infection rates based on New York State indicators are about 1.6, 1.7% in our county right now. The difficulty is that the metrics that are used by the CDC are not aligned with the same metrics that we're using in New York State. The number of cases, positive cases of COVID-19 on the national level is divided by 100,000 residents. Additionally, there's a testing measure that is different than what is applied in New York State. And so that needs to change in order for the large majority of the counties in New York State to not have to cohort their students at the middle school and the high school level. There are only 2 counties right now in New York State that are not in the higher risk classification. I would encourage anyone to go on the CDC website, type in community transmission, and you will go to a map and you will see that the majority of the counties using this metric are considered to be in a substantial or higher risk category. That needs to change in order to permit more students to come into the school.
Next question. If there is a case in a classroom, will the entire class need to quarantine for 14 days or 10 days?
The current requirement is 10 days, and it's not necessarily the entire class. The 6 feet social distancing measure will still be in place for contact tracing. So any students in proximity of 6 feet for more than 10 minutes of a student that has been tested positive for COVID-19 will have to quarantine. Quarantine period, however, is 10 days. Ms. McGrath, did I get that correct?
Yes, you did, Mr. Simons.
Okay.
Nice job.
Very good. So the social distancing requirement has changed, but not the contact tracing requirements.
Correct.
All right, next question. We have a few based on virtual Wednesdays. So for Goff and Columbia, if we can't have in person, can we do live virtual? And similarly, Mr. Simons, would we consider eliminating live virtual Wednesdays for additional in-person days?
We are discussing a modification at the middle school and high school level that would enable all students on their remote days to live stream into all classes, irrespective of teacher. We are having discussions about the practical aspects of doing that. Additionally, so that the students would at least be able to engage on the same pace with all teachers at the middle school and the high school level. And we are looking at that as one option. Additionally, we have talked about the elimination of virtual Wednesdays at the middle school and high school level. And the difficulty there is that while the benefits for some students would occur by being able to come in to class in person one additional day every 2 weeks, the downside of that is the students would have an additional asynchronous remote day every 2 weeks. And based on some of the feedback that we've gotten from parents, that trade-off may not be positively perceived by students and or parents, but we're still working on it as a potential option.
Follow-up question to one earlier. If and when the transmission rate changes from high to a lower level as outlined by the CDC, would grades 6 through 12 be brought back full-time in person?
Yes, when the guidance changes or when the transmission rate is at a level which enables our schools at the middle school and the high school to implement 3 feet social distancing, we will be doing that.
Next question, what will be the plan to keep K-5 students in the elementary schools cool when the temperatures are 80 to 90 degrees and masks have to be worn?
Since September, we have been operating what is called a purge program in our heating and ventilation systems, and we have been bringing in higher levels of fresh air every day than what is required by New York State regulations because of the COVID-19. So we would expect that typically in May and June, the room temperatures in the majority of our elementary schools do get quite warm, that level of fresh air would continue to be coming into the building. We have to be cautious about using fans, and it has been recommended that fans be utilized to push bad air or warm air out of the classroom to the outside, and it's an option that is being considered. But we have to make sure that we don't have fans simply operating as they typically would, blowing potentially contaminated air around the classroom and not pushing out the bad air and bringing in fresh air that is less likely to be contaminated with COVID-19. I'm going to try to get some of these questions out to these administrators who are patiently awaiting. So let's pick a question that perhaps one of our principals can address.
Okay, next question. If exposure happens at school and students are quarantined, how will they make up work since there's no remote days anymore?
If this question is referring to the K-5 level, the students are assigned tutoring within the requirements of the district and the state. So at the elementary level, when you have a situation where a child is out sick for a protracted period of time, or in this case, quarantined, depending on the number of days and how that quarantine is impacted, the number of school days, tutoring is arranged through the principal and Mr. McHugh's office to make sure that students are supported in making up the work and not missing classroom instruction.
What are the other options being considered for grades 6 through 12?
This is a great question. I'm glad it was asked. On Friday, we sent out a survey. And at this point, not all parents at the middle school and the high school level have responded to that survey. I would guess that some are waiting for this meeting to learn a little bit more about what was being considered. As of this morning, 753 parents responded who are currently have students in the hybrid program. That's a combined middle school and high school total. 132 parents who are parents of students on the full remote program responded. The data that we get back from the survey and why we asked for it is we need to take that data student by student. So your sixth grader, for example, or your seventh grader, eighth grader, ninth grader, all the way up to senior year. And we need to look at your child's schedule. And we need to see what classrooms your child is in, how much space would be available to bring more children in. So for example, if children are coming on an A schedule, how many more kids would be in that classroom on that schedule for B days? And we need to see the capacity of the classrooms. So that getting that data into us is critically important for us to be able to figure out what, if any, options would be available to bring more students in grades 6 through 12, either back on a 5-day schedule or more likely a 4-day schedule. But we need complete data. If we don't have sufficient data, we don't know how many kids are going to be in those classrooms. And we don't know what the model of instruction could be. So that's very important to get that data in, right? It doesn't necessarily bind you, but when we do make a decision and we assign kids to come in more days per week, that decision will be binding for the rest of the school year. Mr. Harkin, anything to add on that?
No, that you're correct, Mr. Simons. We just really need to see the space. The numbers are important. It's critical for us right now at the 6 feet to see how many kids we can get into the room. And again, like you said, it's just important that we get all that information from parents, and hopefully tonight we'll provide them some more information. We can get that information.
Mrs. Barker, anything to add on that? I don't know if Mrs. Barker is connected to me, but point is we are looking at different ways to serve the students in person. One of the ways that we're looking at this issue is if we don't have sufficient space in the classroom to continue to operate under 6 feet, there is a model that we have used to help some students whereby students on a rotation basis could go to another area of the school under supervision and potentially live stream into the class on their Chromebook with headphones on, okay? That may give some kids some additional experiences of being in the school, increased socialization, and still permit them to participate in class. Not much different than live streaming from home. It's live streaming from within the school, and we break those kids into groups so it's not the same kids going out into that breakout room every day. That's one option that we're looking at the 6th grade level right now, in anticipation that we might be able to, at least at a minimum, bring 6th grade back for 4 days of in-person instruction. And the timeline to try to do that would be a week from Monday, which is May 3rd. May 2nd, excuse me, May 2nd.
Will elementary students still have a snack?
I'm going to kick that one out to Mr. Grignon.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Simons. Yes, we will be looking at creative ways to ensure if we cannot be socially distanced 6 feet as to how we'll be able to provide snacks to our students at those in those areas that we cannot maintain 6 feet social distancing. So, for example, some of the ideas that we have talked about have been to have the students utilize the cafeteria when it's not being utilized, so that way that they can be socially distanced, take a mass break, have snacks. Also utilizing the outside on nice days to take a quick snack break with a mass break, and also looking at utilizing supervision of students in the hallways where they could be socially distanced in the hallway 6 feet, working on work or having a snack break at that time as well.
Thank you, Mr. Grignon. Any other options under consideration at the elementary level? Anyone? Okay.
I think Mr. Grignon summed it up nicely. Those are the options we're looking at as well, but we're always open to other ideas.
Will child vaccination status be considered in high school return policy?
Currently, under New York State regulations, this is not permitted. We are encouraging as many families, as many staff members to get vaccinated. And we know that in the case of the Pfizer vaccine has been approved by the FDA for use with 16 and 17-year-olds. And we will be announcing soon, in addition to the opportunities that are provided locally, for example, up at Hudson Valley to be vaccinated. We are working with some pharmacies to provide our own vaccination clinic for students in partnership with another district. And we're working on that right now. We don't have all the details, but that will be occurring within the next couple of weeks.
And 6 through 12 receive more live instruction versus remote days.
We are working on that plan.
Since middle school and high school are not going back, is it still important to complete the survey? And if so, what is the purpose for data collection?
Okay. This is similar. This is a similar answer to what I answered prior. We are going to try to bring more students in either on Wednesdays or on Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, depending on what we learn through the survey. We have to get a count of the students and we have to compare those numbers. So, for example, if a parent completes the survey and said, I'm perfectly content, my child is doing well in the hybrid, that's one fewer student that we need to be concerned about scheduling in for additional days in the same classes. And that potentially gives us the ability to schedule a student into class who may have a similar schedule of a parent that says, I really am concerned that my child finish the year with more in-person days. We don't guarantee that we can do that in all cases. We could if it was a 3 feet requirement without cohorting, but we want to look at it. So the data that we get from the survey has to be completed by almost everyone at the middle school and the high school level, so we can get an accurate count on what our classroom space issues would be and how specific courses would be affected by more kids coming in 4 or 5 days per week.
Do the new guidelines state that children do not have to wear masks on the playground?
The guidelines do not indicate a specific rule for playgrounds. They say that, but basically the kids can take the masks off when they're outside for limited periods of time.
Is there an option to opt into busing now with full in-person? That is, if we had opted to transport kids when it was hybrid.
We would take under consideration specific requests. It really varies by bus run. We're trying to keep the social distancing on the buses to the best of our ability. That may mean that we are not going to be able to have one student per seat, which was our goal throughout this year so far. I know that at Red Mill, for example, and Mrs. Squatchy can talk about this a little bit, we have a problem with parent drop-off. We appreciate that parents were pitching in and dropping their kids off, but so many of them are that the traffic is backed up throughout Hampton Manor. Mrs. Squatchy?
Yes, Mr. Simon. So right now we have around 89 families dropping off each day and picking up each day. And when we add our 3rd through 5th graders, that line will increase only by about 10 or 11. That is because many of them have siblings in K1 and 2 who are already getting dropped off and included in that line. It backs all the way out to Hampton Ave, and we definitely have a few spaces available on most of our bus runs. I think there's one that is completely maxed. So I did put out a newsletter to families this weekend and asked if there was anyone who was interested in making a change to the bus to please contact me or the bus garage, and we can help and assist you with that.
Thank you, Mrs. Squatchy.
What if infection rates climb again?
Under the current New York State guidelines, we are required to be prepared to offer in-person learning, virtual live instruction, and remote learning options. Okay, we're still operating under the current guidance. I don't anticipate that this will occur between now and the end of the school year. In the event that it does, we'll make every effort as we have this year to maintain the current models that we have in place. But there always is the potential that COVID-19 could spike within our county and our region. We have not been under any state and or county orders since September to close our schools. We have remained open under the hybrid, and I would not anticipate that that would happen. I'm only anticipating positives. We're making progress with the number of members of our community, including faculty and staff that are vaccinated. We've learned a lot about COVID-19 and how to manage it in terms of our protocols within the schools. I'm looking at scenarios that bring everybody back in the fall, if we are permitted. So I only want to think optimistically.
Will any teachers currently teaching remotely be required to change to in-person instruction? We are remote and like our teacher.
Good news is the answer to that is no. All of the accommodations for additional kids coming in at the elementary level have been done within existing hybrid teachers, and there's no changes in reassignments of teachers to different grade levels or from full remote to hybrid. So there'll be continuity of working with the same teacher for the rest of the year.
Do you anticipate a larger number of people being put in quarantine with contact tracing?
I don't know is my honest answer. You know, over the course of the last couple of weeks, we've had some situations in which the number of children that we've reported to the community who have been infected has been ranging from 3 to 7 kids at any one time. In some cases, while we are bound by confidentiality from sharing specific information, in some cases, those cases were related to a neighborhood and or a contact spread that was occurring outside of school. We're aware of what happened, how that happened. So whether or not that would result in bringing more kids in would result in more contact tracing, we don't know. The rules haven't changed. If you come into contact with somebody within our classrooms or within our schools who was tested positive for COVID-19, and that person was symptomatic within 48 hours of having been in contact in the school, anybody who was around that person for 6 feet or less distance for 10 minutes or more will be contact traced and likely to quarantine. Marissa, anything to add on that?
Thank you, Mr. Simons. You covered it well. We maintain the within 6 feet for 10 minutes or more. And we make sure to contact trace all of our employees as well as our students.
Thank you.
Mr. Simons, I would just add, we do contact trace for asymptomatic cases as well.
Okay. Thank you. So an example would be we get somebody who went and initiated a test but had no symptoms, and we know that that person was in our school. We have to do the contact tracing.
Will there be any opportunity for outdoor concerts for music students?
Well, over the course of the last few weeks, we've approved musical, for example. We are working with the music department to approve ensembles. I would expect that most of the concert performances right now, based on my review of their information, would be virtual, but we have also permitted the option for groups to do outdoor concerts. Mr. Harkin or Mrs. Barker, I don't know if any of you or Mr. Newman have heard anything about music teachers possibly considering performances outside, which would be nice.
We have talked about it. Unfortunately, the music teachers don't like the acoustics of our outside venues. They really like to be in our auditorium. We have a state-of-the-art auditorium, so they're looking at ideas. They are thinking about doing a couple things outside, but they would like to try to do shows, stream them, or if we can say under the limit of 200 people, invite maybe some of our parents in for some of those things. So those things are being discussed.
The guidance for activities that involve gatherings, particularly graduation and other types of end of the year events, recently came out. And there are different thresholds regarding the number of participants and different thresholds whether you're conducting the event outdoors or indoors. I believe at the outdoor events, the limitation is 200 or fewer participants in total, which would include the students and the visitors. And you are permitted under certain circumstances to go above that 200, but you have to require proof of a negative COVID test or proof of vaccination, which is administratively challenging for the district to control. But we are looking at that guidance to see what we can do, not only in the area of music, but we are discussing graduation options, prom options, and other nice events for the end of the year, working within those state guidelines.
Okay, we have a question from the chat room in our YouTube live stream. If a student is remote or hybrid, will they be allowed into the school to participate in events on days they are home? For example, senior events.
If senior events are taking place on a student's remote day, they would be allowed to participate in senior events. And arrangements would be made for them to come into the school. Mr. Harkin, anything to add on that?
No, that's correct.
How do these changes affect GCC?
GCC would be under, because it is a program operating within our schools, they're under the same requirements. We're not anticipating any capacity concerns regarding GCC.
What would warrant a closure or shift back to hybrid learning? Will the school remain open if transmission rates in the community rise?
We would have to adjust and monitor the situation as we have all year long. You know, if you go back to December, we were at about 10.5% infection rate in Rensselaer County, and we did maintain in-person days. We do that because we know that the infection rate is not a result of contact within the school. So I would anticipate that unless there was some type of state and or county Department of Health mandate, that we would remain open for in-person learning within the capacity of our district, 3 feet in the case of the elementary school level and 6 feet at the middle school and the high school level until for an undefined period of time. I only anticipate that it's going to get better.
The district appears to be picking and choosing certain students to bring back. This is no longer equitable for all students. They are all suffering.
We really didn't pick and choose. As an administrative team, we discussed general criteria, such as students that required additional services to be successful, students that were not engaging or attending at all, either in person or remotely, students that had special needs and English as a new language services that would enable them to be better provided by the kids coming in for more days. The state regulations require us to prioritize students for in-person learning based on those needs. We developed a criteria and we prioritized those needs, and we brought as many students back as we could, and we're continuing to go through that process. So it's really not picking and choosing, it's establishing a criteria based on the state regulations, and then determining which students meet that criteria and how much space and program staff do we have to be able to provide the program. Any administrators want to add anything on that?
Mr. Simons, I would just add that if there's a parent or family out there and their child really is struggling, to contact their school principal and problem solve and see if we can support in a different way.
Thank you.
When and how will Columbia High School students be notified if they are returning to school?
We have to get the survey back from everyone, and then we have to take all of those students and plug them into different scheduling options. And once that process is completed, we'll make an announcement as to whether or not we can accommodate any more students at the middle school and the high school level. As soon as that process is completed, and as soon as we are able to do that, we will provide the notification. So I can't give you a timeline. If all of the students' families, the middle school and high school level, completed that questionnaire that was sent out last Friday, by the end of the day tomorrow, we'll get right on it. And we'll find out what options might be available.
4 Regents exams are being given this year along with AP exams, which begin next week. How are those students' needs being met with these high stakes exams?
I can comment that I know that a number of teachers, and I'm going to ask Mr. McHugh and Mr. Harkin, I know that a number of teachers on their own initiative have been offering review classes on some of their remote days. And I know of some teachers who even offered remote classes, virtual classes for assistance with AP during their own personal time. So we are trying to make every effort possible to provide those types of Regents review and AP preparation instructional options as we have in the past. Mr. Harkin?
That's right, Mr. Simons. A lot of our AP teachers have been going above and beyond and offering extra help and extra review classes, and they will gear up more towards that as we get closer to the exams, which start in May. For the Regents exams, we have outstanding teachers, and they will have our students prepared to take those exams. We're working with Mr. McHugh's office to determine the waiver from New York State with exams being exempt or not exempt. So we plan on having some information out to our parents so they have an understanding of what their kids will be going into when they take the Regents exams. But again, I'm confident that our parents will have, that our teachers will have our students prepared for those exams.
Thank you, Mr. Harkin. Mr. McHugh, anything to add on Regents exams?
Just that, you know, New York State filed for a waiver with the U.S. Department of Education. That waiver was denied. So we do have the 4 required Regents. However, passing of those Regents will not impact the students' diploma requirements. So regardless of the outcome on those Regents, the students' graduation and diploma will not be impacted in any way. However, we are quite confident that we will continue to show very strong results in the New York State Regents, just like we always have. There are numerous school districts that are in the same situation as us, especially the larger districts. Very confident that our teachers have our students prepared and ready to go. In regards to the AP exam, there's been a lot of discussion of whether or not those exams would occur and what they would look like, if they're going to be able to be done virtually or in person. We've been well prepared with these are things we monitor all the time. We monitor course failures by every term. And if a student is passing the course, then the student can be exempt from that Regents, but we would like to encourage our students to take those Regents exams because we have performed very well in the past, and we expect that to continue even this year.
Thank you, Mr. McHugh.
I'm concerned about the stress this change in scheduling will put on teachers and students this close to the end of the school year.
Based on the feedback, specifically at the elementary level, based on the feedback that we've received from 2 surveys, the overwhelming number of parents want their students to come back for 5 days of in-person learning. And the we balance the stress on our staff, which is important to us, and our stress within the district with the expectations of our families that now that we are permitted to do this through New York State guidelines, we've made a determination that overall, the change in schedule will be beneficial to most kids and most families. And so that's the direction we're going in.
How will these changes affect prom and graduation for seniors? And I see a related question in our chat room. Will any end of the year events be held in person, for example, senior award ceremony or graduation?
All of those events are being looked at right now by Mr. Harkin, the high school administrators, and our student leaders. I'll let Mr. Harkin comment on the status of graduation preparations and other plans, including end of the year ceremonies and the prom.
Yes, we're looking to try to have as many in-person events as possible. Again, we have to try to keep the events under 200. We're looking to do an outdoor prom and an outdoor graduation and keep the total attendance below 200 so that we can avoid the testing. And we should have those plans finalized, I would imagine, by the end of this week. And we'll be making an announcement to all of our parents soon. And I will also be holding a senior parent meeting again on Zoom to answer any questions for parents. So they can look forward to that. That should all be finalized this week. And we hope to have that information out to our parents as soon as possible.
Thank you, Mr. Harkin. Middle school end of the year events. I know that Mrs. Barker had a commitment. Mr. Newman, end of the year events, status of preparation for some of the end of year events, such as eighth grade elevation celebration and other end of the year.
Absolutely. We've recently had discussions revolving our awards ceremony and a way to maybe have parents in, but live stream to our students within the school. So for our awards ceremony, we're also discussing different options for our elevation celebration, but we also discussed that they thought that parade last year went very well and people really enjoyed that. So we're looking at more traditional options and that as well, but we're definitely looking to make sure we have those events this spring.
Very good. Thank you.
What can we do to encourage New York State to reevaluate our status as high risk?
I would say first and foremost, anyone is encouraged to write a letter to the New York State Department of Health or to your elected assembly or Senate representatives. That letter should specifically ask for a review of the New York State Department of Health guidance that would permit middle school and high school students to come back for full in-person learning and not have this social distancing requirement predicated on community transmission rates that are across the country and not localized. Additionally, one request could be to permit counties to direct and review plans by the schools to have their middle school and high school kids in at 3 feet. We will be having a forum where this issue, among others, regarding school reopening in September will be coming up on June 2nd. The plans will be announced, and that will be an opportunity to engage in a virtual forum such as this with elected officials, as well as the Commissioner of Education, and perhaps a representative from the New York State Department of Health. We're working on that. We've been working on that for a month or so. We were just waiting for a commitment back from the Commissioner of Education, and we received that today.
What will happen if rooms are at full capacity? Will students who want to go back have to go to a different school?
Right now, for this remainder of this year, I think we're in fairly good shape with the room that is available in most schools. I'll defer this to the principals, but we're able to get everyone at the K-5 level in class, currently participating in the hybrid, and any of those that we know of are coming off of full remote into our classrooms with their current teachers in their home schools, the school assigned to their attendance area. But we do have some buildings that are tight, and it's a process that we have to evaluate every year. Do we have any situations right now that are tight?
Mr. Simons, Red Mill does. We have no room at second grade. So we do have a few second graders who have either moved into the district or come off of remote that have needed to go to Janae or Beltop for the remainder of the year, but they'll be back with us at Red Mill next year.
Very good. Thank you, Mrs. Schlosser.
I'm getting close at fifth grade, Mr. Simons, but so far we've been able to accommodate all the requests we've received to date. We'll continue to look at each one individually as well as our space needs.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Garb.
We have a couple questions related to sixth grade.
Mark, I was going to ask you to ask about that one that's sixth grade being looked at individually.
Yep. Okay. Yep.
Yes, it is. And we have a way with some fine tuning and some further discussions of bringing our sixth graders back in. We need a little bit more time. We need the surveys. But sixth grade is being looked at separately from 7 through 12. And ideally, I would like to be able to have sixth grade be the next grade level that comes in full 5 days in-person instruction. And I have a fairly strong level of confidence with a little bit more discussion and planning within our district, we will be able to do that. We may not be able to do that by April 28th. We may be able to do that within the next couple of weeks. And so sixth grade has been prioritized differently now that we have the capacity at K through 5.
For those who are currently hybrid and do not want full in-person learning, will there be an option to switch to full remote?
That will be the only option at the K-5 level.
Seeing a few of these questions, my middle school student would prefer an additional remote day if she could add an in-person day and eliminate virtual Wednesday.
Again, we're taking a look at that as an option. We don't know how many students and families perceive that as a positive change. We did do a survey earlier in the year that indicated that how that impacted students and families was different depending on the family and depending on the student. So that's one of the challenges with all of this. We're trying to be as responsive to individual student and family needs within constraints of space, within constraints of staff. But that's good feedback as we continue to look at whether or not at the middle school level we might be able to make some changes for Wednesdays.
Will students really be able to keep a safe distance on the bus if all students are back full-time in elementary school?
We're going to work within the parameters that we have, and we're going to work within the guidance that we have to do the best that we can regarding socially distancing on a bus. We have communicated with other districts who have increased elementary students prior to us for 5 days a week. They are doing the best that they can within the general guidelines, and that's what we're going to have to do. The students will all be wearing masks. The bus driver will be wearing a mask. The windows will be open. We've had 0 cases of COVID-19 spread on a school bus within our school district. We have had students quarantined and bus drivers quarantined and bus aides quarantined as a result of a potential exposure, but we've had no evidence through the contact tracing that any students or any drivers or school staff members contracted COVID-19 because they were on a bus.
Can we prioritize bringing special education students back at the middle school and high school levels?
We're continuing to have that discussion, looking at the specific needs of the students and the continuum of services that they receive. Ms. McGrath, want to add anything to that?
Yes, I would just reiterate that's why the survey results are really important, so we know how much space we have to work with before we prioritize bringing more students back.
In many cases, if not most cases, the special education students are integrated into regular classrooms or integrated into special area classes. So we not only need to look at the count of special education students in particular programs, we need to look at the count of the other students that are in those programs that they are pushed into or to receive those services and that instruction. So we need complete information to be able to make some of these determinations.
Will COVID testing be provided for the elementary children? If yes, what will be the frequency of testing? And I suppose we could open that up to K-12. Will there be COVID testing?
Currently, the district does not have plans to do testing for the remainder of this year, with the exception of the testing that we do on a voluntary basis for participation in interscholastic athletics. One of the positions that I have taken as the superintendent is that I would prefer, and I've heard this from some parents, I would prefer to have a testing requirement in our school district for students as opposed to the limitations of social distancing for students, the 3 feet parameter that requires cohorting of students at the middle school level. If you recall, at the beginning of this year and into the fall, the state was utilizing metrics to determine whether schools were in yellow zones, orange zones, or red zones. And if schools were in a certain community with a certain infection rate, testing of between 10 and 20% of the students was required. We have that plan ready to go. I would prefer to have all students in September, K through 12, not have to limit course offerings, electives, AP, and college courses, which we would have to do at the middle school and the high school level in order to get them all in with the cohorting requirement. My advocacy to the state is remove the cohorting requirement, and if necessary, require schools to do testing on a basis to be determined. So we're not planning to do it this year. I'm open to doing it next year if it brings all of the kids in for 5 days of in-person instruction, because we know how to do it. We've done it successfully, and we would have access to, as long as we have had access to the testing, which we believe we would have. The testing kits, the materials.
6th grade is still elementary school. Why can't we figure out how to cohort them? They don't have languages or advanced classes at this point.
On this topic of 6th grade being in the middle school, last week I participated in a New York State Department of Health webinar. During that webinar, they talked about the cohorting rules. I sent an email immediately after the meeting. How is it fair that if 6th grade is located in an elementary school, K6, they don't have to cohort but can go 3 feet? But if the 6th grade happens to be located in a middle school, they have to cohort. And I've yet to receive an answer on that question, but I am following up. Additionally, we will be looking at different models of 6th grade, again, to get through the rest of this year and into the fall, in order to make sure that we have an option for our 6th graders that does not require cohorting. Currently, it would be difficult to do because our 7th and 8th grade teachers are shared with 6th grade. For example, there are a number of teachers that teach both 6th grade and 7th grade, or 6th grade or 8th grade, and they would be operating under schedules that don't mesh with one another unless you change 7th grade and 8th grade. But we are looking at that idea of having 6th grade potentially be more self-contained.
If students are vaccinated, will they have to quarantine if they are exposed?
It's my understanding, no, but I want to ask Marissa and Molly to chime in on this one.
Thank you, Mr. Simons.
You can go, Marissa.
So you're correct. If a student who is age 16 or older has been vaccinated with both the first and second dose, and it has to be greater than 2 weeks after that second dose, they do not need to quarantine. And it has to be within 3 months of receipt of that second dose of the vaccine. So right now, you have to be fully vaccinated, has to be greater than 2 weeks since your last second dose, and within the 3-month time period of receiving that dose in order to be exempt from the quarantine. Molly, did you have anything to add?
Nope, that was very well said.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Cannon.
Will the district still consider hiring more counselors? Belltop shares their counselor, and there are more children who have needs, especially now.
We're looking at the social emotional needs of all the students and all of the schools, and we are including some social emotional and mental health support over the summer, additional to what we currently have in place. We anticipate that students coming back in the fall at all schools, including Belltop, will have significant needs or different needs than what we would have anticipated prior to last March. And we are looking at the utilization and part of federal monies that the district will be receiving to take a coordinated approach to making sure that all of our students' needs, including for mental health, are addressed. So this is a discussion that we're having internally within the district. Our board is very supportive of making sure that any students that require services receive those services, or families that require services receive those services. We're waiting for some clarifications regarding some of the federal monies that came to our district and how those monies are to be claimed and spent. And mental health of our students has been identified as a priority. Whether that will translate into additional staff at Belltop, I can't answer that right now. Those decisions will be based on a full determination of the needs of all of the kids across the district.
My middle schooler reports that recently the desks have been moved so that they are no longer 6 feet apart. Can you clarify?
You'd have to call the principal and provide the name of the student, and we would look at the schedule to see what is occurring there. Okay. There have been some classrooms set up to see what they would look like at 3 feet, but we are not implementing 3 feet at the middle school level at this time. So without knowing the specifics of the classrooms that are being referred to, I really can't answer that question. There's been no broad effort to move all of our middle school classes to 3 feet.
Mr. Simons, can you discuss the plans for summer school this year?
I'm going to kick that out to Mr. McHugh, who's been patiently awaiting an opportunity. Mr. McHugh is our Assistant Superintendent for Instruction and Curriculum, and he's designed with input from our building principals and our directors a summer learning program. Mr. McHugh.
Yeah, in regards to summer school, like last year, you're referring to 12-month extended school year. You're talking to about students that participated in the extended school year program that consists of students with disabilities, students that have an IEP. We are looking to expand that and have an Elevate program. They're still in the planning phase. We're looking at our students that would be eligible and be invited to a program like that. We are also looking at staffing, looking at some options to run that summer school program either internally in our district or looking at a few other options as well. But our initial plan for summer school is 5 days a week. But again, we're still in the planning phase of that.
Thank you, Mr. McHugh. We want to encourage as many families and as many children as possible to participate in the summer learning opportunities that we provide, even if it's just for the socialization and the social connection. Although they will be targeted towards students and their academic needs, we hope that families who we recognize need a break, kids need a break, will see 4 or 5 weeks in the summer as an opportunity for putting themselves in the best position possible for September. And more information will be coming about summer programs within the next 3 to 4 weeks.
All right, we're at 8 o'clock. Mr. Simons, I did have a couple questions here. Just if you could review the proposed changes that we've discussed here tonight and what will be brought to the board, and then we can close out our meeting.
The only changes that are being brought to the board for tomorrow evening are effective April 26th. Make sure I got the date right. Next Monday, all K-5 students whose parents want them to participate in 5 days of in-person learning would be able to do so. Grades 3, grades 4, and grades 5 would be eligible to come in 5 days per week. The only options that would be maintained at K-5 would be full in-person learning 5 days per week and full remote. I will also update the board, as I have the community tonight, on considerations related to 6th grade as well as grades 7 through 12, and what we are doing to gather sufficient information to make determinations as to whether or not more students at the middle school level and the high school can be brought into school for more in-person instruction at some time within the next few weeks. Remembering that we have to work within the 6 feet social distancing requirement currently under the regulations at the middle school and the high school level. So the presentation that I shared this evening is close to identical to the information that I will share with the board tomorrow evening. And I will ask the board to adopt a resolution that indicates that we're going to move forward with the K-5 and we're going to continue to study grade 6 and grade 7 through 12. I want to emphasize the importance of completing that commitment form that I've been referring to as a survey. Those numbers are very important so that we can analyze the options that are available at the middle school and the high school level. And I want to close by thanking all of you for your support for your children, for your patience. I think it's safe to say that everyone within our community is no different than everyone across our state and our country. We've grown fatigued by this, but we've also been inspired by some of the support that you provided your children, by some of the awesome accomplishments of the kids at every grade level as we've been operating this hybrid program. We've been celebrating the successes of our district and each individual child within our district and the contributions that every single staff member, including these excellent school leaders that are with me tonight, to make our hybrid operate as well as it has over the course of this given school year. No one has grown more impatient with this than me. I would like to see all students back in our classrooms in person 5 days a week. I would have liked to have seen that weeks ago. We aren't able to do that under current regulations, even though we have demonstrated that we can educate our kids safely for everyone. So I ask everybody to join me and our district in advocating for further changes to the guidance that would enable September to be everybody back in class, resuming whatever level of normalcy we can resume with appropriate health and safety parameters in place, kindergarten through 12th grade. We recognize the impact this has had, not only academically, but socially on everyone. We feel that we've done a good job with constraints that were not controlled by our district, but we want everybody back. And we ask you to understand that the decisions that can be made at the local level by me, by our team, by our staff, and by our Board of Education are limited. We waited a month for the CDC guidance to be adopted into New York State regulations. We need advocacy to get the kids back to school in September. and we will continue to keep you informed of the efforts that we can make locally to try to provide as much in-person learning as possible as we continue on ways to accommodate health and safety concerns of our children, of our staff members, and our families. So I wish everybody continued health, happiness, and safety. Please work together with us as you have really since March of last year. And I thank the members of my administrative team who have taken their time this evening to join us to help us to address the plan and to field your questions and concerns. And I hope everybody has a wonderful evening. Stay safe, stay healthy, and stay optimistic. Thank you.